I remember watching Superman 3 as a kid and feeling equal parts thrilled, confused, and downright scared. This 1983 installment of the Superman franchise isn't your typical heroic adventure. It's a bizarre mashup of goofy comedy, oddball sci-fi, and one scene straight out of a horror film. Yes, this is the one where Superman gets drunk, straightens the Leaning Tower of Pisa, teams up with Richard Pryor, and, oh boy, a lady gets sucked into a supercomputer and turned into a cyborg. If that sounds like a fever dream, that's because Superman 3 is kind of a fever dream. In the following analysis, I'll share my personal and humorous take on why this movie is so weird, exploring its underlying themes and the strange circumstances that made it the oddball of the Superman series. From its opening minutes, Superman 3 makes it very clear. This is not going to be a serious film. Director Richard Lester cranks the campiness up to near cartoon levels. The first sequence in Metropolis plays out like a slapstick chain reaction. Street performers, a man falling into a manhole, a pint-sized rescue of a drowning mime, and even a hapless guy catching on fire and bumping into toy penguins, all interlinked like some superhero Rube Goldberg machine. As a kid, I remember thinking, is this Superman or a comedy sketch show? The tone was that silly. In fact, the movie feels like an attempt to capture the zany fun of 1950s Silver Age Superman comics. It's unabashedly, unapologetically goofy as hell, embracing absurd gags more than earnest heroics. Turns out there's a reason for this shift. After the success of the more serious Superman 1 and 2, the producers, the Salkins, decided to steer the franchise into comedic territory. They even cast legendary comedian Richard Pryor in a lead role. Literally because he went on The Tonight Show and joked about wanting to be in a Superman movie. The result? Superman 3 often feels like a Richard Pryor comedy that just happens to guest star Superman. The film is so packed with gags and one-liners that it oscillates between parody and action. It left a lot of fans scratching their heads at the time. Imagine showing up for epic superhero drama and instead getting scene after scene of Pryor's hijinks and over-the-top slapstick. No wonder some viewers were alienated by what many called a tonally disjointed mess. That's not to say the comedy isn't entertaining. It is, in its own wacky way. I laughed at bits I probably wasn't supposed to, even as a kid. There's a ridiculous sequence where traffic lights literally come to life. The little red and green crossing man figures jump out of their boxes and start fighting like cartoon characters. Did that really just happen? Yes, it did. And I'm still chuckling at the sheer absurdity. The movie is full of these, did I really see that? Moments. Just to name a few of the highlights that still tickle and baffle me in equal measure. Superman goes on a bender. After being exposed to some shady synthetic kryptonite, Superman gets tipsy at a seedy bar, flicking peanuts at liquor bottles and shattering them with superpowered flicks. Even Spider-Man 3's cringy dance scene caught moody Superman causing baroom havoc like a drunken demigod. Corrupter of world monuments. Our hero gone bad straightens the Leaning Tower of Pisa just to be a jerk, ruining a souvenir seller's livelihood. He even blows out the Olympic torch on a whim, causing international confusion. Petty, much? Office Space, 1983 edition. Gus Gorman, Pryor's character, hacks his company's payroll system to siphon fractions of a cent into his own account, a real-life scheme known as salami slicing, later famously referenced in Office Space. Watching it years later, I had a eureka moment. So that's where they got the idea. Gus's stunt was oddly ahead of its time, even if the film plays it off like a harmless prank. The comedic approach does give the movie a certain charm. As an adult, I can appreciate the boldness of blending vaudeville-style physical comedy with superhero spectacle, something you definitely don't see every day. But back then, little me sat there wide-eyed, wondering why Superman's world had suddenly turned into a Looney Tunes episode. The underlying theme, if there is one buried in all this silliness, might be that it's okay for superheroes to have fun. Superman 3 seems almost rebellious against the idea that all superhero stories have to be dark or serious. Its "why so serious" philosophy actually predates the modern era of Marvel quippiness by a good 20 years. In that sense, The movie does manage to channel a bit of Superman's lighter comic book roots, but there's a downside. It often veers into outright spoof territory, and that tends to kill the stakes. At times, Superman is reduced to the punchline of a joke. One reviewer nailed it when they said the movie made Superman look equal parts sap and a-hole. That tonal whiplash sets the stage for the next act of the film, when the goofiness suddenly gives way to something entirely different. The dark side. The strangest plot twist in Superman 3 comes courtesy of some synthetic kryptonite laced with tar. Yes, tar, as in the stuff in cigarettes. Apparently even Kryptonian minerals weren't safe from 80s anti-smoking messaging. When Superman is exposed to this knockoff kryptonite, it doesn't kill him. Instead, it gives him a supersized bad attitude. Suddenly our clean-cut hero becomes a selfish, mean-spirited grump. He's rude to friends, neglects saving people, and causes all kinds of mischief just because he can. As a kid, seeing my hero go dark was unsettling and kind of heartbreaking. I had never imagined Superman acting like a bully. In hindsight, this whole plot line is basically Superman going through a really bad case of identity crisis. Or maybe a full-blown moral hangover. Things escalate until the movie delivers what I still consider its coolest and most baffling sequence. Superman literally fights himself. In a surreal junkyard showdown, the moody evil Superman splits off and goes toe-to-toe with his goody-two-shoes Clark Kent persona. It's one of the film's genuinely gripping scenes. Christopher Reeve nails it, playing both sides of the conflict, grappling in the dirt and tossing himself into piles of junk like a one-man WWE match. This fight is often cited as the highlight of the movie, showcasing Reeves' range and the story's inventive spin on inner conflict. And let's be honest, watching mild-mannered Clark choke out his sneering, drunk-on-power alter ego was both satisfying, go Clark, and deeply weird. At the time, I probably didn't understand the metaphor, that this was the physical embodiment of Superman's internal struggle between good and evil. I just thought, whoa, there are two Supermen and one just killed the other. It's heavy stuff if you think about it. Our hero literally has to strangle his dark side to come back to the light. The movie lays out a pretty on-the-nose message here. Even Superman isn't purely good. He's got inner demons, and conquering them is the real challenge. Looking back now, I find this concept kind of fascinating. It's like a pop culture spin on Jekyll and Hyde, or maybe an unintentional riff on the Superman mythos. Comic fans might even spot shades of Bizarro, Superman's flawed mirror image nemesis, in the corrupted version of him. Sure, the movie doesn't dig very deep into psychology, but it does give us a creative visual for the hero's moral decision. Beneath all the camp, there's a meaningful idea here. Even the greatest among us can fall, and the real strength comes from pulling yourself back. For 8-year-old me, the takeaway was simpler. Good Clark literally punches bad Superman in the face. Awesome. As an adult, I appreciate the quasi-philosophical notion that our greatest enemy can sometimes be ourselves. It's a surprisingly bold message to wedge into such a goofy film, and despite the clumsy execution, that junkyard brawl still holds up. Memorable, weird, and oddly satisfying. We can't talk about Superman 3 without mentioning Gus Gorman, the character played by Richard Pryor, arguably the most likable villain henchman you'll ever see. Gus is introduced as an unemployed, down-on-his-luck goofball who suddenly discovers a prodigious talent for computers. How does he discover this? By spotting an ad for a coding school on the back of a matchbook while sitting in the unemployment office. Yes, apparently you, too, could become a hacker in the 80s just by taking a mail-order course. Who knew? In no time, Gus goes from zero to tech wizard. The movie shows him magically mastering programming and hacking into his employer's systems like it's the easiest thing in the world. As a tech-savvy adult now, I find this utterly hilarious. Superman 3 is completely unapologetic about not giving a damn how computers actually work, and it shows. We see Gus typing frantically on a keyboard and suddenly he can control anything. Bank accounts, weather satellites, you name it. The film is a product of its time, when computers were still mysterious, almost magical to the average person. So the writers basically treat them as all-purpose sci-fi plot devices. Honestly, the movie makes hacking look as simple as playing a video game. Which, fun fact, it literally does at one point, showing an Atari-style missile launch visualization on screen. It's peak 1980s nonsense, and I kind of love it. From my young perspective, Gus was pure comic relief. He's clumsy and constantly cracking jokes. It is Richard Pryor, after all, so I wasn't too concerned with the plausibility of his skills. But I did find it odd that this bumbling guy somehow becomes the second most important character after Superman. The underlying commentary, if any, might be about the emerging power of computers and how even an average Joe could wield incredible influence with technology. It taps into a very early 80s anxiety. What happens when anyone can access this kind of power? The film basically suggests a world where a clever hacker can outwit corporate overlords, and even give Superman a run for his money. Gus's salami-slicing scheme, where he siphons fractions of a cent from employee paychecks, is played for laughs, but it's based on real fraud tactics. In fact, it's one of the surprisingly realistic details in this otherwise far-fetched plot. Eventually, Gus teams up with the villain, Ross Webster, a corrupt CEO who realizes this computer genius can help him carry out his grand schemes. And by grand schemes, I mean utterly bonkers ones, like reprogramming a weather satellite to create hurricanes and destroy Colombia's coffee crop. Because apparently nothing says evil like ruining the world's caffeine supply. The dynamic between Gus and Webster is weirdly comedic. Webster is basically a bargain bin Lex Luthor, a rich megalomaniac with a stylish penthouse lair, while Gus is his reluctant tech sidekick who constantly cracks jokes at his boss's expense. I actually felt kind of bad for Gus. He's not truly malicious, just easily swayed and excited to finally be making some money. By the film's climax, Gus even redeems himself by switching sides to help Superman. So in the end, the homeless, bumbling fool turned computer genius isn't a full villain at all, just a guy who got in over his head. As a kid, I appreciated that Gus wasn't evil. He was funny and ultimately did the right thing, which made him easy to like. Looking back now, Gus Gorman's character feels like a kind of satire of corporate tech culture and greed. He's a pawn caught between bigger forces, the everyman who exploits the system a little, stealing petty cash via computer, only to get co-opted by a true villain for bigger crimes. It's a surprisingly modern archetype, and Pryor's comedic charm ensures Gus remains endearing even while doing questionable things. You could argue Gus is the heart of the movie in a weird way, an antagonist who's not really bad, caught in a film that never fully decides whether it wants to be a comedy, an adventure, or both. Just when you think Superman 3 couldn't get any weirder, along comes the scene, the one forever etched in my memory as that nightmare fuel robot lady. Let me set the stage. In the finale, the villain Ross Webster has built a giant supercomputer hidden inside a cave. Unexpectedly, the machine achieves a kind of malevolent sentience and turns on its creators. As Superman battles the rogue computer, Webster's sister, Vera, tries to escape, but she's not fast enough. Robotic arms shoot out, grab her, and drag her into the machinery, kicking and screaming. What follows genuinely scared the hell out of me as a kid. The computer's wires and circuits envelop Vera, and we watch in horror as metal plating spreads across her face. Her eyes turn into blank silver orbs, and her voice warps into a shrill metallic shriek. She's transformed into a cyborg, completely against her will. And this isn't some creepy sci-fi short tucked away on late-night cable. This is happening in the middle of a PG-rated superhero film. I wasn't the only kid traumatized by it either. Plenty of others remember this as one of the scariest, most unexpected childhood movie moments. It's like Willy Wonka suddenly turned into The Exorcist for a full 60 seconds. I had legit nightmares about Vera's silver eyes snapping open, blank and soulless. Even sci-fi, decades later, admitted the shot of her silver eyes still occasionally haunts my subconscious. Yeah, I can 100% relate. Superman faces his dark side while Vera is unwillingly turned into a cyborg, two of the film's most bizarre moments. What makes the robot lady scene so jarring is the tone. It comes completely out of nowhere. Up to that point, the movie had been mostly goofy and light-hearted. No one had gotten seriously hurt. The threats were cartoonish, oil shortages, fake kryptonite and ATM hacks, and everything was played for laughs. Then suddenly we're witnessing genuine terror. A woman screaming for help as she's forcibly assimilated by a machine. It's straight up body horror. One article nailed it. The scene looks like it came straight out of Tetsuo, the Iron Man, a cult Japanese body horror flick, and became the source of children's nightmares for generations. Yeah, that's not an exaggeration. I remember my siblings and I all going silent in the living room, looking at each other like, "Are we still watching a Superman movie?" The tonal whiplash of that moment is a testament to just how wild the 80s were in terms of what you could sneak into a family film. It's almost funny in hindsight. Imagine a modern Marvel movie randomly shoving in a Cronenberg-style body horror sequence halfway through. Not a chance. But in Superman 3's era? No problem. The censors must have been asleep at the wheel, or just a little too chill. Oddly enough, as I got older, I came to appreciate this scene. Not just for how terrifying it is, but for how well it's done. The practical effects hold up surprisingly well. The machinery attaching to Vera's skin, her glowing eyes, the chilling monotone voice. It's a short but powerful brush with the horror of losing one's humanity to technology, which is actually a compelling theme. In a movie that spends most of its runtime treating computers as silly plot devices, this moment suddenly reminds you that technology can be dangerous too. It's like the film yells, "Surprise! Tech can be terrifying." Thematically, it even taps into the classic sci-fi fear of artificial intelligence going rogue. The supercomputer becomes a mini version of Brainiac, the AI villain from Superman comics, absorbing a human into itself. For just a few moments, Superman 3 stops being a campy kids-love movie and becomes a full-on sci-fi horror cautionary tale. Of course, Superman defeats the supercomputer and saves the day, but the damage to our young psyches was already done. I slept with a nightlight on for weeks after that. Looking back on Superman 3 now, I have to laugh at how bizarre it truly is, and yet I have a fondness for it because of that. As a kid, this movie was a roller coaster. It made me giggle, cheer, and cover my eyes in fear, all in the span of 2 hours. As an adult, I now understand why it turned out so weird. The filmmakers were experimenting with tone, mixing broad comedy with superhero action, and pushing the boundaries of what a Superman story could be. The strange behind-the-scenes circumstances, like bringing in Richard Pryor for star power and sidelining Margot Kidder's Lois Lane due to a dispute, resulted in a very different kind of Superman film. One less concerned with epic mythos and more focused on laughs and gasps. While that experiment didn't exactly please critics or many fans at the time, it did give the world something unique. Beneath the flying pies and evil supercomputers, Superman 3 does explore a few genuine themes. The duality of good and evil within a person, quite literally, the influence and fear of technology, and the idea that even a great hero can stumble and redeem himself. These ideas are just presented in the most offbeat way imaginable. The film's legacy, in my mind, is that of a cult classic. A guilty pleasure I can poke fun at, but also admire for its quirks. It's telling that when Superman returned in later years, the filmmakers swung to the opposite extreme, making the stories dark and ultra-serious, perhaps overcorrecting for the light-hearted silliness of Superman 3. But I'm glad this oddball entry exists. It taught me that superhero movies can be many things: funny, flawed, scary, and downright absurd. In the end, I've embraced Superman 3 for the wild ride it is. It's totally bonkers fun, to quote one modern retrospective. Where else can you see Christopher Reeve both acting drunk and playing his own evil twin? Or Richard Pryor skiing off a skyscraper in a pink tablecloth cape? Or witness a scene that gave an entire generation nightmares, sandwiched between slapstick gags and cartoonish antics? Love it or hate it, Superman 3 stands alone as a singular, surreal chapter in Superman's film journey, one that a certain wide-eyed kid, me, will never forget. And honestly, despite all its flaws, I kind of treasure it for that. Superman contains multitudes,